I am super excited to welcome Kerri to the TURTZED Podcast this week. Kerri and I have done some work on human design, and we're going to dive into it. So the information that we're going to get into is something that really helped me better understand myself, better understand the way that I worked. And frankly, it was priceless during this time of making a huge shift in my career, to say the least. So you may be asking yourself what human design is and how it works. And we're going to get into it today because Kerri is not only going to help us better understand human design and how it works, but also share how she got into the human design practice. And I'm super excited for everyone to learn a little bit more today. Turtz and the content in this episode represents the opinions of me, Charles Turtz, and Kerri Keaton, and it's presented solely for informational and educational purposes. Neither myself nor Kerri are healthcare or mental health care providers, and we are not licensed or authorized to provide any professional or medical advice. So from that point of view, nothing in this episode should be relied upon and is not designed to diagnose, prevent, or treat any health or mental health care condition or disease. You should consult a doctor or licensed professional if you have any questions. And you can also check out turtzed.com/privacy for more information. All right, Kerri, let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about how you got started with human design.
Okay, great question. And the story is quite simple, actually. It was 6 years ago on a Sunday morning. I got a text from my sister, whom you also know,
That I
and
do.
she simply asked, "Have you heard of human design? You need to look up your chart right this minute." And I kind of tease because she's my older sister. So I've spent an entire lifetime of doing absolutely everything that she told me to do. And in that moment, I was like, got it. And I hadn't heard of human design. I looked it up. I looked up my chart. And I feel like since that Sunday morning, when I dove in and started to learn about both the modality of human design and also my own chart, I literally feel like I have now been on this 6-year journey of every day referencing back to it and going deeper and deeper into both learning about it so that I can share and also experimenting and experiencing the modality in my own life.
I love that. And shout out to Courtney because I got the exact same text. And it was like, have you ever heard of human design? No. She explained it and I was like, let me talk to your sister immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me, what really stood out was how you explained what human design was. So why don't we take a minute and dive into what is human design?
So, human design has been described in many different ways. And one of the ways that really landed for me is when I heard that it is the science of differentiation. My point of view, and also my teacher's point of view, is that it really is an incredible mix of woo woo and science. And it is the synthesis of several ancient modalities. So, the astrology system, the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu chakra system, the Kabbalah tree of life. And then there is an arm or a branch of human design that I study that also includes quantum physics. All of those modalities are combined into this one system that allows us to look at the blueprint or the map of a person's unique energetic makeup and the gifts that they have innately to share with the world that helps them to live out their purpose. It's also been explained, and this really landed for me, as our soul curriculum and outline. And then how we choose to live out the expression of that outline is completely and 100% up to each and every one of us as individuals. But it is outlining the unique aspects of all of us and the gifts that we will easily be able to share with the world when we are living, true to our authentic self or our higher selves.
I can say from my experience, it felt like I was really seen for the first time. And I was a little skeptical going into it. Being a skeptic and having trust issues, I don't like to give away information. without someone sharing it with me and then me confirming it. And that's kind of how I approached the beginning of it. And I remember in our first session, it wasn't even 5 minutes in, and I was already contemplating, how could Kerri know this?
Yeah.
So when you read your human design chart and or had it read to you and you started to learn about it, what made you make that shift into this field of work and starting the vessel?
Oh man, it was several life experiences that really led me to take the leap. I sort of describe it as I climbed the corporate ladder successfully. And I worked really, really hard for literally 20 years. And I remember having an experience one day where I felt like, oh man, I just spent all of this time climbing this ladder. And now I'm looking around and I kind of feel like the joke is on me, because there's so much of who I am that I don't feel safe or able to share in my professional world. I found myself in this moment of conflict or maybe tension, where I realized it would feel a lot better to me if I could show up as my whole self, instead of showing up as my corporate self, who was responsible for driving revenue and achieving the numbers that impacted the bottom line. And I certainly was not a perfect leader in the corporate environment, but I always approached my work in a really heart-led, heart-centered way. And I got a decent amount of feedback from the CEO of the company around my leadership style, that I needed to be more focused on numbers in the business. And I felt like in that moment, wow, this is such an interesting place for me to be, because I have been successful in this system, right, in the corporate world. And I believe that my success is because I really loved hiring incredible people and helping them to nurture their own goals and supporting them in being successful, which ultimately meant that business was good. And even in all of that, I was still getting feedback that I needed to focus more on numbers and less on people's feelings. So that was happening in my career at the same time that I was going through a really big event in my personal life. My husband and I were in the process of adopting our first child, and we went through an experience that is called a failed adoption, which essentially meant we were at the hospital, the baby was born, and the mama decided after a few days that she was not going to place the baby in our home. So it was a combination of going through that heartbreak and reevaluating what is really important to me, and also having this sense of, wow, I've committed so much of my time and my career to running operations and revenue for organizations. And the part of that I loved was the people, leadership, guidance, support, coaching. And my style wasn't resonating with, the founder and the CEO of the company. So all of those things combined, happening at the same time, I realized that the best thing for me to do would be to pursue my education and invest some time in training and really going deep into human design, so that I had the opportunity to build something of my own.
I love that. I think the end result is so beautiful, and I can't imagine all of those things going on at once. You're in a mold where you did it and you can continue to do it, but it doesn't feel like you, it doesn't feel authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going through a failed adoption.
Mm-hmm.
Starting a new venture is unbelievably scary. What gave you that strength to not only process the life personal changes, but also take a huge leap of faith and dive headfirst into this?
Mm-hmm. Great question. I approached it in a fairly practical way. So I allowed myself to lean into learning and creativity. And I started the vessel by dipping my toe in. Honestly, I started it by sharing that it was my passion project. And at the time it was, because I was still, in my role. So all of this happened almost 3 years ago. So I remained in the role that I was in for about 6 months after we experienced that failed adoption. And I was going through my own healing from the grief that we experienced. And so I allowed the vessel to be a creative outlet where I could experiment and test and lean into my own human design chart while also nurturing my curiosity and desire to learn more about it. So I juggled all three of those things for a while, actually. And it's interesting because in my chart, some of the things that I have activated, there is a energy in the human design chart. And essentially it is the energy of really big experiences happen that allow for expansion if someone is willing to live into that expression of it. So when we got home from that failed adoption experience, I remember pulling my chart out and I was like, where is that activated, and where is that specific energy activated in my chart? Because it was a moment in time where I could reflect back on my life and realize that major life events have happened. And typically when they happen in my life, it has acted as a catalyst for me to almost timeline hop. So for me to move forward with such a fast pace. So I realized, oh, this is actually really aligned for me. And can I lean into it? So I dipped my toe into creating the vessel through the lens of this is my creative outlet. It's where I am going to nurture curiosity and also start to play and practice and share this with other people and see where it goes. And so then fast forward to January of 2023, we brought our son home from the hospital. And we got a call on Sunday. We met him and his birth parents at the hospital on Monday, and we brought him home on Tuesday. So while we had been on this journey to adoption for, at that point, over 3 years, he dropped into our life very, very quickly. And while I took a few months away from full-time work, that's when things really started to land for me in a very clear way. And I was able to, I don't even want to say, it's not even about I had the courage to take the leap, but everything aligned. So there was no question in my mind that this was now the time for me to curate my life in a way that my family was at the core, and I was able to spend my time working on the things that really lit me up. Partially for myself, because I knew in my heart of hearts that the work that I was doing previously wasn't totally aligned. I'm so proud of my career. I worked with incredible companies and incredible people. And there was always a part of me that was unfulfilled, or a part of my nervous system that was pushed so far out of alignment that it didn't feel good in my body. I wanted this next phase of my career to allow me to experience success on my terms, joy on my terms, and also the increased responsibility of who do I want my son to remember me being? There was a clear answer to that question for me. I want him to remember me being loving, present, fully committed to possibility, and not overworked and resentful about having to spend my time doing things that I don't fully love.
Yeah. I'm going to try not to flood out all the emotions I'm feeling right now. just imagining you leaving the hospital and looking at your human design chart, like the strength that must have taken to not look at the negative, but try to understand what was that moment trying to teach you and how could you use it in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about this again on the podcast, but I want to reiterate it because I think it's so important. We all have been through different life experiences, and the traumas I experienced as a child and as an adult were very painful. And they've also taught me so many things and given me so many gifts. And I think as you continue to share your story and getting to the point of your adoption with your son and how quickly that happened and the work that you must have done between those two periods, it just shows that you can have the dichotomy of both positive and negative in the same moments.
Mm-hmm.
I can relate so much to the looking at the human design chart because when we met, I was going through a difficult time and I was really struggling. And I had this idea to do podcast and coaching and consulting. And I'm like, what am I thinking? How am I going to make this happen? And I remember our first session, you laid a roadmap to what made me feel the most authentic.
Mm.
But I can relate to that feeling, which I think a lot of people can, when you're in a difficult situation and you want a path forward, to be able to better understand oneself is so important because that is what got you to where you are today. And in your modality, it's human design. And there's so much in that you can learn about yourself. It's such a beautiful story of using a modality to truly find your authenticity and do what you love. I want to dive into a little bit more of the work that you do. I personally felt seen. I felt heard. When I got excited, I could feel you get excited. When I was frustrated or like trying to figure something out, you were there to support me and help me try to figure it out through the human design chart. And I think that is the sign of just really following your path when you can dive in head first with someone,
Mm-hmm.
even if you don't know them. So I'd love to dive more into human design and the structure of it.
Yeah, for sure. So I like to share with all of the folks that I'm working with that the foundational aspects of human design are incredibly impactful. It is important to start with understanding those 4 or 5 aspects of one's chart and to experiment with it, to have a practical application so that you can begin really leaning into who you were designed to be. And the chart is incredibly deep and detailed. So I also share that starting at the foundational aspect is amazing. There's going to be a lot that's uncovered. You are going to feel valued, seen for who you are. And the deeper you want to go, the more opportunity there is to go deep. Like I mentioned, I'm 6 years into this journey with human design and I'm still learning. I'm still discovering different aspects of the chart and how that shows up in different areas of my life. The structure of it is that it's as complex and complicated as we are humans. And also there is an incredible level of simplicity because it at least in my opinion, it is an experience of coming home to the person that we've always known ourselves to be and maybe haven't either given ourselves permission or have not been given permission by others to be that.
I feel that so deeply. And for those of you who are listening to this, Google right now a human design chart and you'll fully understand why it is so complex.
Mm-hmm.
In understanding my human design chart, one of the first things I took away from our conversation, again, we were barely scratching the surface, and immediately it was wait for the invitation. When someone wants help, they're going to ask for it and they know that it's available to you. And waiting for that invitation will make the help that you provide so much more impactful. And again, we were just at that beginning part where you're breaking down the different pieces. But that's what's so interesting. We are all very complicated, which to your point is so beautiful about the work. It's evolving. It's forever changing.
Yeah.
When you think about getting started, what are some of the things that human design can tell you about yourself? Just high level.
Yeah. So the most foundational aspect of human design is called an energy type. And it's what most of us are seeing, right? So if you see something about human design on social media or hear someone talking about it, you're likely going to hear them talking about their energy type. And there are just a small handful of different energy types. And that is describing how we are here, how we are designed to exchange energy with the world around us. That is how we exchange energy with the people that we're in relationship with, families, friends, coworkers. It's also how we are exchanging energy with the people who are around us that we are not in relationship with. So the person walking down the street or standing in line next to us to get juice or coffee, we're constantly, as humans, in an energetic exchange with each other. It's also how we are designed to exchange energy with nature, with different experiences, with the quantum field. So it's that most foundational aspect, and there are 5 energy types. The other foundational piece that's really important is going to talk about how we co-create with the universe. So you sharing that for you to wait for the invitation is really energetically how you are co-creating with the universe. And it is because for your energy type, that waiting for the invitation is about respecting and honoring your own energy. Because frankly, the people who aren't asking you, the people who aren't inviting you in, they aren't ready for you. So we want you to protect your energy so that you're not spending time and resources on people who aren't quite ready for what you have to share. The foundational aspects also talk about or show us how we make energetically aligned decisions. So this is, I think, one of the most life-changing aspects of human design, because the teaching in human design is that we make aligned decisions through a felt sense in our body, not through our thinking mind. And I believe that there are many, many different arenas in life in our modern society where there's a lot of focus on making logical decisions, thinking things over, making a pros and cons list, really contemplating. And the teaching in human design, there are 7 or 8 different type of decision-making types. So it's going to show up differently in your body, where your system, your energy is going to help make a decision that ultimately will be the decision that you honor long term, if that makes sense.
100%.
I love talking about decision making with people because all of us make decisions with other people. So it could be family members, friends, coworkers. So when we can start to honor that we might not be energetically designed to make decisions in the same way as the people we're making big life decisions with. You know, a great example of that is my husband and I in our human design, we have different decision making types. And when we learned that about each other, it allowed me to honor that it takes him a little longer. He might need time. He might need to take a walk. And the way that I'm designed is to make a decision in the moment. And I don't actually ever want to revisit it. So when we
We're very
that,
similar.
Yes, when we learned that about each other, it helped to reduce a major amount of friction, especially during times when, you know, big decisions are ahead of us. So that was a really incredible way for us to experience human design.
It's a whole new version of couples therapy.
Totally.
One aspect that we also talked about, which was being kind to myself, and that it's all a learning experience. And I think in connections, I tend to beat myself up a lot and think, oh, could we have done something differently? And with friends or family or a partner, can be very difficult because I take that internally and I get super frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from what you had gone over with me in the chart, being able to say, I need to be kinder to myself and understand that it's all a learning experience was helpful. And taking it a step further, I had an issue uploading one of the podcast episodes, and my wonderful mother was trying to help me and source and Google and try to figure it out with me. And I literally said, Mom, I love you, but I need to figure this out on my own. And I appreciate the help, but I knew that I needed to process it on my own and take a moment before I could go back and talk with her and brainstorm, because I was trying to be kind to myself and also fix the problem. Obviously, two different examples of I was getting wonderful support and kindness, but I wasn't able to receive it in that moment. And I needed a second because I was frustrated and I needed that time to process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think learning to be able to communicate how you're feeling in that moment, which is very new for me, but for my mom to understand, I just needed a minute, that's also changed our relationship. And that's not taken lightly. That was a huge moment for both of us, and ended up getting it out 15 minutes later. And she was unbelievably helpful, but I needed a minute to just process what had happened on the episode and
Yes.
why it didn't upload correctly.
Yes, totally. It's such a great example. The other aspect in the foundation session that I lead will look at, in human design, it's called our profile, and it's two main archetypes or characters that we are living out our life through. And I also really love that aspect of human design because it allows for a person to understand that the way that they're navigating life is likely going to be quite different than the other people that they are in relationship with. And I believe that the profile or those two archetypes are really, really powerful because, again, it's innate. It's not about I have to learn how to show up in this archetype. It is naturally how a person is going to already be living their life. And it's probably different than the people that you love and know and trust and spend lots of time with. So again, it allows for that level of permission to be fully who we are individually here to be. And I can share, so my profile is called a 3-5. And essentially what that means is I'm here to experience and learn through experience, and then to act as a mirror to others. And what's so interesting about that is I'm the type of person who, if I hear about something and I'm interested, I want to go and do it. I don't need to research it. I don't need to see the science behind it. I don't really need to even hear from other people if it is legit or not. And that's something that oftentimes people don't necessarily understand. I'm not an incredibly critical person, right? Like, you don't really have to prove anything to me before I try it. And throughout different points in my life, that's been challenging because I have been labeled as gullible. It also means that I'm probably going to quote unquote fail more than the next person because I have to jump in and experience something before I truly know if I honor it, if I believe it, if I want to continue to do it, if I'm successful. So that also means there's not a whole lot of waiting. And I see this show up in a lot of areas of my life, but especially something that I'm fearful about or nervous about, I will be the person who's like, can I go first? And it's really coming from this, like, I have to jump in and do this thing and experience it so that I know if I'm going to be safe or successful, or if I need to pivot and try something new. And so when I learned that about myself, it felt like someone had given me a permission slip to experience my life as the way that I learn and grow versus researching or going deep into some form of education before I make a decision. And that's not wrong or bad. Like, there are plenty of people, especially folks who are really close to me in my life, that it's very aligned for them to know every detail, to go very deep, to learn as much as they can before they step forward. It's just not aligned for me to live in that way.
I think to pause for a second and just kind of go into your explanation of why this isn't a labeling system, but rather a blueprint.
Yes, yes. And this is one of the things that my teacher is very passionate about. It isn't a labeling system. And oftentimes you can see that people use it as a labeling system, right? So I am a manifesting generator. It means a lot of things, including I'm multi-passionate. It's very aligned for me to have many things going on. So even thinking back to the earlier part of our conversation, I was holding a very big experience of grief. I was working as an executive in the corporate world, and I decided that I was going to start this creative project all at the same time. That might sound like a lot for a person to take on, and it was really aligned for me because I am a manifesting generator. Now, sometimes you'll hear people say things like, oh, well, I'm a manifesting generator. And here's what I've learned. Human design is one tool that can be used for personal development and expansion. It's certainly not the only tool, but it is a tool that's available. And each person, all 7 billion of us, have a unique human design blueprint. And it's acting as our sole curriculum for how we are here to live out life this time around. But then on top of that, there are very individual and specific aspects of energy that are built into our chart. So manifesting generators are going to have some common traits, and manifesting generators are also going to be wildly unique because of all of the different aspects of our chart and how we bring that expression to life. So using human design or any aspect of human design as a way to label ourselves or label others is actually taking away from the power of it being a tool for development. Something that my teacher is adamant about continuing to explain to us and inspire us to ensure that we're always going deeper and we're always looking at what's the next level of a person's chart so that we can help them really tap into the uniqueness of who they're here to be.
When you think about it from that perspective, what are the ways that you think people can use it?
There's so many ways. I believe that we can utilize the information in our chart as we approach things that come up in life. So what's interesting is when we look at the chart as a whole, there are certain things that we can look at that will determine where do we have consistent access to different energetic gifts. Those are going to be the areas where we will see themes throughout our life, and that we are likely going to be consciously working through those themes. There are also areas in our chart that will point to challenges or learnings that we are going to experience when we are in relationship with other people. So I think that is valuable information to know. We are all going to continue to experience patterns. Even when we are aware of them, they are still going to show up because it is part of our curriculum for this lifetime. And the expansion, the growth, the development appears when we can have an awareness around it. Because when we have awareness, then we also have choice. So it's not necessarily that once we understand a pattern, it's going to dissolve and we're never going to see it again. We'll probably see it even more often and more clearly because we're aware of it. And then we get to choose. Do I want to react to this? Sometimes, yes, we're going to react. We're human. We're here to learn and grow and make mistakes and not live in the highest expression of ourselves. And sometimes we're going to have the opportunity to look at the situation and be like, here's that thing again.
Yeah.
This time around, I'm going to respond instead of react. And I'm going to see if the outcome is different. So I literally feel like we have on a daily basis opportunities to put the learning of human design into practical application.
It's so impactful because I think when I better understood my trauma, when I better understood the patterns I was recreating, when I better understood, honestly, my emotions and feelings because I was so disassociated, I was able to think and reflect differently. And that's what I also think is so interesting about this, that for me, I feel more seen and heard when someone comes to me and says, "Hey, can I help you with that?" Or if someone's telling me a story and I know that they want advice, I don't just give it. I wait for the invitation because sometimes they don't or they're not ready to hear it. And I think for me, very honestly, I struggled with this with my brother. I made a very cute joke at his wedding that he was so lucky to grow up with mom, dad, and me. It was so wonderful to have three amazing parents. And we stayed in that pattern for a really, really long time.
Uh-huh.
And I remember after one of our sessions, and I can't wait to hear my brother's reaction to this after he listens to the podcast, but he was going on about something at work and I was just listening and I wasn't saying anything. I was actively engaging and saying, I understand and I hear you. And I never offered advice. And at the very end, it was almost as if he was shocked that I didn't. And that
Mm-hmm.
was a new practice for me. And when he asked for the advice, which I wanted to give him and help him and share what I knew to maybe help him in the situation, our connection felt even better
Mm-hmm.
because for me, I felt more seen. It wasn't like I was just giving it away, that giving the energy away, giving the thought away, and not knowing where it resonated. To have him ask, and it was a very small shift, it was one of the things that changed our dynamic,
Mm-hmm.
like truly. And so I think that as you're looking at a chart, how can human design help you feel more seen and heard and valued and live in a more authentic way to attract complementary energy to what you're putting out into the world?
That's a great question. I do believe that those foundational aspects are powerful. And the example that you just shared came from the foundation session that we had together. To answer your question, I think it's twofold. Looking at someone's chart, allowing them to understand their own energy, and also being able to share enough about the other types of energy that may be present in their life so that a person now has an awareness that, like, oh, well, not everybody is designed the way that I am. And when I say it out loud, it does sound so incredibly obvious. But learning about human design also helped me to uplevel my leadership in a massive way. When I started to learn about the 5 different energy types, it was like I got bonked over the head. It was this moment of like a major aha moment where I realized that for many years, I had expected folks to be able to show up with the same amount of energy that I have. And as a manifesting generator, if I'm doing something that I love to do, I can easily work for 10, 12 hours straight, nonstop, like because I'm so in it. And there were often times in my career where I didn't understand why someone could not give that same level of commitment or energy to a project. And so it was a huge learning for me as a leader to understand that there are many people who are designed to not work in a way that the structure of a 9 to 5 job is built. There are many people, projectors are one of them, who are really designed to work in maybe a 3 hour burst and then to take time to rest and restore, and that they can get as much done in that 3 or 4 hours than other folks like me spend an entire day doing. So once I started to understand those things about other people, I had the ability to nurture their energy and to sort of rewire my understanding of what does it mean to achieve success. And human design allowed me to decondition some of those beliefs and allowed me to see like, oh, wow, if I actually help each of my team members to structure their day and week in a way that lights them up and align on what the end result needs to be, I can create a work environment where people feel valued, safe, supported, inspired to do the work in the way that feels good, and we can still be successful, which was really exciting for me. It was meaningful in my own development as a leader. And, that makes me think about another really big and impactful part of the study of human design and looking at someone's chart is to begin understanding conditioning. And for us to have an awareness of what beliefs are learned and where is it appropriate for us to reevaluate those beliefs. That's a very big part of human design as a practice and as a development tool. And it's an absolute game changer because we're all conditioned and we will continue to be conditioned in many ways. And also having the permission to look at our conditioning and rewrite our story is something that I find to be both fascinating and empowering.
I think just from my experience working with you, what I would share is when we first met, I had to have control in my own life. Everything was structured. I did this at 5 a.m., went to the gym, I ate, I had certain times, I did this, I did that. I needed that control to make me feel safe. It was something that I was working on letting go of, but what actually empowered me to really let go was you said something about you have to build your own schedule and the schedule has to work for you and it's not going to be the same every day. And I think that giving myself permission to go sit outside, lay by the pool, I bought like a shade for my computer screen. I go out and lay out for 2 or 3 hours. And I'm not kidding. It is the best work that I do. I try to get outside 3 to 4 days a week because I have seen the work product that comes out of those sessions, if you will, in the sun between the nature and fresh air. And it just feels open.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so different. We have to better understand ourselves to be able to better connect with other people. And we're all going to be at different points in our journeys. But it's that level of understanding where even with my brother, I didn't want to force the information on him. I wasn't trying to baby him. There's a lot of responsibility on me for trying to force that, not let him figure things out. It came from a protective mode and love,
Mm-hmm.
but he may not have seen it that way. And I can safely tell you, he did not see it that way. But understanding and changing that connection over the last 6 months, I couldn't be more thankful for this and some other modalities that have helped us truly connect more,
Mm-hmm.
because I have a better understanding of myself and how that could possibly impact another person if I don't stay aligned to my authentic self, which in this case was waiting for the invitation versus just jamming information that I knew into the conversation if it wasn't desired at that given moment.
Yeah.
So as we start to wrap up today, I have one more question for you. What would be something that would be thought-provoking that people could do at home today to think about, is this right for me? And am I open to a conversation about human design?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And there are two things actually that come to mind. The first is ask yourself if there are aspects of you that you really love and embrace and potentially haven't felt the permission to share boldly. If the answer to that is yes, then I'm confident that looking at your human design chart and having a session to dive into the foundational aspects of it will allow you to be seen and valued as the once in a lifetime miraculous expression of life that you are. That is one of the most beautiful things about this system that I have really taken away, is that we are all living and experiencing this life together, and we are not meant to be exactly like each other or our mentor or our parents or the people that we look up to. We are designed to be uniquely ourselves.
There is no mold to be put in.
Yes. Yes. The other thing that comes to mind is thinking about your story and how you came to human design, thinking about how I've used it in really big moments in my own life over the past several years. Something that I truly enjoy is working with folks who are in a cycle of transformation. And there are 3 stages. So there's disruption, which can be something that is not positive, right? It can be a loss of some sort, a loss of a relationship, a loss of a job, but it can also be something really positive. So it could be starting a new relationship, deciding you want a career change. Then there's the void. So living in that space of knowing that something either needs to change or something has changed and life feels new and different. And in the void is where a lot of magic happens because it's where we're preparing for what's next. And the 3rd stage of a cycle of transformation is expansion. So it is fully stepping into this new story of what's the next chapter in life that we are now experiencing, and having human design as a tool to support a person through the creation of a new phase in life is really powerful. So those are the 2 ways that I think folks could work with me.
So if anyone does a human design session, I would love to hear about that experience and better understand what you took away from it, because I think everyone's going to take away something different. And I want to open that conversation because I love learning about it. And I am confident you may hear from my mom, a couple family members,
Yay!
but super excited. And I truly mean that. If you guys are listening today, DM me on Instagram. I would love to hear about your experience with Kerri. And Kerri, my final question. What is something that someone has told you that impacted your life and you'll never forget?
So there are so many things that actually pop up in my mind that I could share about. But what I will share goes back, it was probably 10 or 15 years ago. I went through a weekend-long self-development course that was really life-changing. So I was working for Lululemon at the time. And back in those days, the store team, the corporate team across all countries was asked to go through this weekend workshop. And I share that context because it wasn't something that I actively sought out to find. And it was probably one of the beginning pivotal moments of my self-development work. The weekend was absolutely wild. And I remember being so nervous going into it. And it was one of the most life-changing experiences. And after the end of this 3-day weekend workshop of intense study and developing an awareness around our thoughts and the internal stories that I had spent a lifetime telling myself, at the very end of this weekend, the facilitator said, I'm going to wrap this up with a closing thought. And what she shared was, life is empty and meaningless. And I had a moment where I was like, wait, what? Like, what is she talking about? Life is empty and meaningless. And I started to internally panic a little bit. And then she went on to share, and I had a realization that this whole thing that we call life is in a way the outline or the structure. What we experience is actually a result of the story that we are creating and telling ourselves over and over and over and over again. And when I got it, like when what she said finally landed for me, it was like everything in life sort of shifted slightly, and like everything started to fall into place in a very different way. because it was the first time that I truly understood the stories that I tell myself, about my life, my relationships, my environment, my earning potential, my gifts, right? The stories that I tell myself about everything is actually what's creating the meaning in my life. I remember walking out of that workshop feeling so empowered and was like, okay, Kerri, so what do you want for your life? What do you want to go create? What do you want to believe in? And it allowed me to really understand that when I say things like anything is possible, or there are miracles all around, those aren't just pretty Instagram quotes for me. It is actually what I believe, because I get to create the story of what I experience in this life.
Honestly, in the weirdest way, like I needed to hear that today.
Yeah.
For so many years, what I told myself about myself held me back. It's just very, very powerful.
Yeah. I mean, it's a gift. It's such a gift. We're here. We woke up this morning. The sun is shining. We have another day.
Yeah.
I know sometimes life is challenging and that it feels difficult and that it is difficult, right? Like I experience that too. And also, we're here. So, yeah, it's like, how can we play and experience and see every single bit of life as an opportunity to grow and expand and move into something bigger than what we have experienced in the past?
I love that. And so I'm so thankful for you coming on today for the human design. I really appreciate it. You can get in touch with Kerri at kerrikeaton.com or the __ vessel on Instagram. And Kerri, thank you for joining us today. And I'm super excited to watch you continue to grow your human design business.
Thank you so much.